In Houston, I spent years giving a homeless boy $10 every day until the day he told me to stop. It started innocently enough. Every morning, I'd leave my apartment just after sunrise, my coffee in hand, my thoughts already on the day ahead. It was a quiet routine, one I looked forward to, even if my life felt a bit lonely. At 50, I didn't have much to speak of, other than a small job at a law firm and an apartment in a neighborhood that felt increasingly far from where I thought I'd be at this age. But in the small things, I found solace. The quiet hum of the world around me, the familiarity of my surroundings, and the little moments where I could help. The boy had always been there, though I hadn't noticed him at first. I guess he'd always been around, just a fixture on the corner of Main and 12th, by the park bench. The first time I saw him, I didn't think much of it. He was just another face in the crowd of people who had been forgotten by the world. But over time, I began to notice the small things. The way he never asked for much, just sat there with his head down, his eyes half closed like he was trying to escape into some other world. He was young, no older than 18, maybe 19, and always wore the same torn-up jacket, clearly too big for him, and a pair of battered sneakers. It wasn't a shocking sight in Houston, where homelessness had become more visible in recent years. Still, there was something different about him. He didn't shout for attention, didn't even look up as people passed by him. It was as if he had resigned himself to being invisible. One morning, on a whim, I decided to stop and say something. I didn't know why. Maybe it was the way his eyes seemed to search for something. Or maybe it was just that I felt like I needed to do something, anything that might make a difference in his life, however small. "Hey, are you okay?" I asked, leaning against the lamppost just a few feet away from him. He looked up, startled, his gaze meeting mine for the first time. It wasn't a warm look. It was guarded. "Yeah," he muttered, looking back down at his shoes. He didn't offer any more explanation, nor did he seem to want my sympathy. I stood there awkwardly, not sure what to do next. But then I reached into my pocket, pulled out a $10 bill, and handed it to him. "I don't have much to give," I said, "but I hope it helps." He blinked at the bill for a moment, then slowly took it, his fingers brushing against mine. I didn't expect a thank you, and I didn't get one. He just nodded, barely lifting his gaze. It felt strange, but also right. I didn't know what he would use it for, or if it would even help, but it made me feel like I had done something. Maybe it wasn't much, but it was all I could offer. The next morning, I did the same thing. And the day after that, day after day, I'd walk to the corner, cup of coffee in hand, and offer him the same amount. "Here, take this. Stay safe out here," I'd say. He never responded much, but he always took the money. Sometimes I'd catch a flicker of gratitude in his eyes, but he never spoke much. As the weeks went on, I became a part of his morning ritual, just as he became part of mine. I would hand him the money, we'd exchange a few words, and then I'd go on my way. It wasn't much, but it felt like we had an understanding. Some mornings, he would nod and give me a weak smile, but it was always a little distant, like he didn't quite trust me yet. I didn't blame him. Trust didn't come easy when you were living on the streets, but slowly, over time, we started to talk a little more. Nothing big, just small things. I'd ask if he had eaten yet, or if he needed anything else. He'd shrug or give a vague answer, but there was a change in him. I think, in his own way, he appreciated it. One morning, I arrived a little later than usual, and as I walked up to the corner, I saw him sitting there, just like always, but this time, he was looking up at the sky. He didn't seem to notice me approaching. "Hey," I said, as I stopped in front of him, ready to hand him the usual $10. He glanced at me, his face unreadable. But something was different today. There was a sharpness in his eyes, a coldness I hadn't noticed before. I extended my hand, but he didn't take it. Instead, he just stared at me for a moment. His expression was almost unreadable. "I don't need your help today," he said flatly, his voice sounding distant, almost detached. I froze, hands still outstretched. "What do you mean?" I asked, confused. "You've always taken it before." He shook his head slowly, his gaze never leaving mine. "I don't want it anymore. Go home." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I stood there for a long moment, trying to process what he just said. My chest tightened, and for the first time in months, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. This was something else, something deeper. "Why?" I finally managed to ask, my voice small. He looked at me for a long time, his face unreadable. "I don't need you," he said, and then, without another word, he turned away. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, unable to comprehend what had just happened. Every part of me wanted to argue, to press him for an explanation, but something told me this wasn't the time for that. Instead, I turned and walked away, feeling like the weight of the world had just fallen on my shoulders. As I made my way back to my apartment, I kept replaying the moment in my head. Why had he said that? What had changed? Had I done something wrong? I didn't know the answers, but I knew I had to find out. There was something about the way he said it, something in his eyes that suggested there was more to his story, something I had missed all this time. I spent the next few days replaying the moment over and over in my head. I couldn't stop thinking about how his words had cut through me. "I don't need you anymore." The cool indifference in his voice echoed in my mind, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. At first, I tried to brush it off. Maybe he was just having a bad day, or maybe something had changed in his life that made him feel like he didn't want my help anymore. But that didn't sit right with me. I had been a consistent presence in his life for months, and something about the way he dismissed me made me wonder if there was something deeper going on. I knew I couldn't just let it go. There had to be a reason behind it, something I was missing. Maybe I hadn't seen it before, or maybe he had never trusted me as much as I thought. Either way, I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that there was more to the story than he was letting on. I decided to investigate. The first step was to ask around. I knew I couldn't just confront him again. He had made it clear that he didn't want my help, and I wasn't about to push him further. So I took a different approach. I started talking to the people who lived in the neighborhood, the ones who passed by him every day, the ones who knew the streets better than I did. It wasn't long before I found someone who had noticed the boy, too. "Yeah, I've seen him around," said a man named Joe, a local who worked at the corner store just down the street. "Used to be a regular customer of mine. Came in now and then for some change. Real quiet kid. Never said much." I leaned in, eager to hear more. "Did he ever talk to you about where he's from? His family, anything?" Joe looked around nervously, as if making sure no one was listening, before speaking again. "He's been around here for a while now, but he never mentioned much about his family, just that he was from out of town. He's got some serious trust issues though. I don't know why, but something tells me he's been hurt before, really hurt." That was the first clue. A kid that young. If he had come from somewhere else, what had happened to him? Why was he on the streets? And why had he trusted me enough to take my money every day, only to turn away from me so suddenly? I kept asking questions, gathering bits and pieces of information, but no one seemed to know much more than Joe had told me. The boy was a mystery to everyone who passed him by. No one seemed to know where he came from, and no one seemed to care enough to ask. To most people, he was just another homeless kid on the corner. But I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to him, and I wasn't about to let him fade into the background like everyone else. The next day, I went back to the corner, hoping to see him again, to maybe talk to him and get some answers. I stood at the edge of the park, watching the familiar faces go by, hoping for a glimpse of him, but he wasn't there. I waited for a while, just standing in the cool morning air, feeling the weight of disappointment sink in. Maybe he had moved on. Maybe he'd found somewhere else to go. But I didn't believe that. Something told me he was still around, hiding just out of sight, and I wasn't ready to give up on him yet. It wasn't until late afternoon, When I was about to leave, that I finally spotted him. He was sitting on the same bench. But this time, he wasn't alone. There was another boy with him, someone I'd never seen before. This boy was older, maybe in his mid-20s, with a scruffy beard and a look in his eyes that made my stomach tighten. The two of them were talking in low voices, and from the way the older boy kept glancing around, it didn't seem like a casual conversation. I didn't want to intrude, but I couldn't just ignore what I had seen. I had been trying to understand what was going on with the younger boy, and this was my chance to learn something new. I walked closer, trying to be discreet, but the older boy noticed me before I could get too close. He glanced at me for a moment, then turned back to the younger boy, speaking in a tone that was too low for me to hear. Something about the way he acted set off alarm bells in my mind. The way he held himself, the way he looked at me, it was almost like he was warning me to stay away. I hesitated, but then I decided to approach them. I wasn't sure what I was going to say, but I needed to find out more. "Hey," I said cautiously, trying to sound casual, as I stopped in front of the bench. I was just wondering if I could have a word with him. The older boy looked me up and down, his gaze hardening. "What do you want with him?" he asked, his voice low and defensive. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "I've been giving him some money for a while. I just want to make sure he's okay." The older boy's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, I thought he might say something else, but then he just snorted. "He's fine," he muttered, standing up abruptly. "You should go." I didn't have a chance to respond before he turned and walked off, leaving me standing there, my heart pounding in my chest. The younger boy didn't say anything, just sat there, his face unreadable. I stood there for a long moment, trying to make sense of everything. Who was that man? Why had he been with the boy? What was going on? The answers seemed to be slipping through my fingers, but I couldn't stop now. I had to know the truth. I couldn't stop thinking about the older man, the way he had looked at me, like I was a threat. It made my blood run cold. Who was he? And why had he acted so possessive of the boy? I felt like I was getting closer to something, but I also had this gnawing sense that I was poking at a hornet's nest. Still, I couldn't stop. I had to know the truth, whatever it was. The following morning, I returned to the corner, but once again, the boy wasn't there. I stood there for a while, watching the crowd move past, hoping to see him. I felt an urgency now, a desperate need to understand what was happening. Was he in trouble? Had I somehow made things worse by trying to help him? Or was there something I hadn't seen, something I was only just starting to understand? I turned around to head back to my apartment when I saw someone familiar walking down the street. Joe, the man from the corner store. He was walking in my direction, carrying a bag of groceries. I stopped him before he could pass. "Joe," I said, trying to sound casual. "Do you know where the boy went?" "I haven't seen him for a couple of days." Joe looked over his shoulder, checking to see if anyone was listening, and then leaned in close. "He's been disappearing more and more lately. Last time I saw him, he was with that older guy again. Look, I don't know much about him, but the kid's trouble, all right?" "Trouble?" I asked, confused. "What do you mean?" Joe lowered his voice, glancing around once more before speaking. "I've seen that guy before. He's bad news. He's not someone you want to get tangled up with. You're better off staying away from him, lady." Trust me, the warning struck me like a blow. I had suspected that the older man was hiding something, but hearing Joe's words confirmed it. Whoever he was, he wasn't just a random stranger. He had a hold on the boy, and I needed to know why. "Do you know where I can find him?" I asked, my voice trembling a little, though I didn't want Joe to see it. Joe hesitated for a moment, glancing around again. "I wouldn't do that if I were you. The kid's been through a lot, but that guy, he's dangerous. He runs with some bad people." "I don't care," I said, surprising even myself with how firm my voice sounded. "I need to know what's going on." "Please, Joe." Joe sighed, clearly conflicted. All right. You didn't hear it from me, but..." That guy's been hanging out at the old warehouse over on East 5th. It's got an abandoned look to it, but people still go there. You'll probably find him there. But I'm telling you, it's not a place you want to get involved with. I thanked him and turned quickly, my heart pounding in my chest. The warehouse. East 5th. It wasn't far, but it didn't sound like a place anyone should go, let alone someone like me. I knew I was about to make things much more complicated than they needed to be, but I had no choice now. There were too many unanswered questions, and I couldn't shake the feeling that this was a key piece to the puzzle. Later that afternoon, I made my way to East 5th. The area was run down, with abandoned buildings and broken streets, and the farther I went, the more I felt like I was trespassing in a world I didn't belong in. But the warehouse wasn't hard to find. It was one of the largest buildings on the street, its windows boarded up and its door hanging crookedly on its hinges. It was the kind of place that seemed to invite trouble. I stood in front of the warehouse for a long time, trying to work up the courage to go inside. Every instinct in me told me to turn around, to walk away and forget about the boy, but I couldn't. I had to know what had happened to him. I had to understand why he had pushed me away so suddenly. I stepped forward, my shoes crunching on the broken pavement, and pushed open the door. Inside, the warehouse was dark and musty, the smell of mold and old wood heavy in the air. My eyes slowly adjusted to the dim light, and I could make out the shapes of old crates and discarded furniture scattered around the floor. At first, I didn't see anyone. The silence was thick, the kind of silence that made you feel like you were being watched. I hesitated, my heart racing in my chest. Just when I was about to turn and leave, I heard a voice, "You shouldn't be here." I froze, my blood running cold. I turned slowly to see the boy, the one I'd been searching for, standing at the far end of the warehouse. He was leaning against the wall, his arms crossed over his chest. His face was unreadable, but the moment he saw me, something flickered in his eyes. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his tone sharp. I had to know, I stammered. "What's going on? Who is that man? Why did you push me away?" The boy's expression hardened. He took a step toward me, his posture tense. "You need to leave. Now." "I can't," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I care about you. I need to understand why you're doing this. Please, just tell me the truth." For a moment, he didn't say anything. He just stared at me, his eyes locked onto mine. I could see the pain in them, pain that I hadn't seen before, the kind of pain that made me realize how little I truly knew about him. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and full of regret. "You don't want to know what's behind all this. Trust me, you're better off walking away." I shook my head, refusing to back down. "I'm not leaving until you tell me the truth." The boy took a deep breath, and for the first time since I had met him, I saw something like fear in his eyes. He opened his mouth to speak, but before he could say anything more, the sound of footsteps echoed through the warehouse. I turned around quickly, my heart in my throat. And that's when I saw him, the man from before, the one who had been with the boy on the corner. He stepped into the dim light, a cold smile on his face. "You should have stayed away," he said, his voice low and threatening. I took a step back, my heart pounding. The boy, looking like he had no choice, stepped in front of me. "Get out of here," he said, his voice shaky but firm, but the man didn't move. "You're not getting away that easily." The tension in the air was so thick it felt suffocating. I stood frozen in place, my heart hammering in my chest, as the older man stepped closer. He was tall, with a rough, weathered face that seemed carved from years of hardship, and his eyes, dark and cold, never left mine. The boy, standing in front of me like a shield, looked smaller now, vulnerable even. This wasn't the confident kid I'd seen on the corner. This was a frightened young man, desperate to protect me from whatever danger lay in the shadows. "You really don't know what you're dealing with, do you?" the man said, his voice dripping with contempt. His eyes flicked toward the boy, then back to me. "You've been playing the Good Samaritan, but you have no idea how deep this goes. I took a step back, feeling the weight of his words, but I refused to let fear control me. "What are you talking about?" I demanded, my voice shaking but steady. "Who are you, and why are you doing this to him?" The man smirked, a cruel, knowing smile that sent chills up my spine. "You really don't want to know. Trust me, lady, you're in way over your head." The boy flinched at the man's words, his hands clenched into fists at his sides, but he didn't speak. It was like he was trying to shut down, trying to distance himself from everything happening around him. I could see the struggle in his eyes, a battle between wanting to protect me and the reality of the situation that was spiraling out of his control. "I'm not leaving until you tell me the truth," I said, more firmly now. I wasn't backing down, not when I was this close to understanding what had really been happening. I had been giving him money for months trying to help him, and now I needed answers. The older man chuckled darkly, shaking his head. "You think you can just walk in here and make everything right? It doesn't work like that. You're too late." He's already in deep with people who don't take kindly to outsiders poking around. "Who are these people?" I asked, my voice sharp. "What's going on with him? What's his connection to you?" For a moment, the man didn't respond. He simply studied me, his eyes narrowing as if deciding whether or not to reveal the truth. Then, with a sigh, he leaned against one of the old wooden crates, crossing his arms over his chest. "His name isn't even what you think it is," the man said, his tone low and almost casual, as if he were telling a story he had long since grown tired of. "He's not just some random street kid. He's part of a family, one you'll wish you'd never heard of. A family with ties to the kinds of people you don't want to mess with." I looked at the boy, who was still standing in front of me, his face pale, his eyes now downcast. This wasn't the first time I had noticed his reluctance to talk about his past, but this was something far deeper than I had imagined. My stomach twisted with a mixture of concern and confusion. The man continued, his voice low and measured. "He's the son of a notorious criminal, someone with connections in places you wouldn't even believe. He's been on the run for years, hiding from people who would do anything to get to him. And now you're here, getting involved in a situation that's way beyond your understanding." I was stunned into silence. Everything I had assumed about the boy, the simple kindness, the quiet gratitude, the innocence, suddenly felt like a mask, a facade he had worn to protect himself. The boy I had been helping, the boy I had thought I knew, was someone else entirely. "I didn't want to tell you this," the man went on, his eyes flicking to the boy, then back to me. "But you needed to know. You've been giving him money, but you've been feeding into something you can't even comprehend. You've been making it easier for him to stay hidden, but you're not helping him. You're making him more of a target." The boy's fists clenched tighter, his jaw tightening. I could see the anger building inside him, the conflict that he had been holding in for so long. But still, he said nothing. "This isn't what you think," the boy finally spoke, his voice raw, almost pleading. "I didn't ask for this. I didn't want any of it." He turned to face me fully now, his expression desperate. "I'm not who you think I am. I don't want you involved in this. You don't know what these people are capable of. They'll come after you too." I shook my head, my mind reeling from the revelations. "I don't care about your family's history. I care about you. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you trust me?" He took a shaky breath, his eyes flickering to the older man before meeting mine again. "I never wanted anyone to know. I thought if I just kept quiet, stayed in the background, no one would find me. But I've been running for so long, and now you're here. I didn't mean for you to get caught up in this." The weight of his words hit me like a ton of bricks. I had been trying to help him, thinking I was doing something good, but I had no idea what kind of dangers I was stepping into. The boy whose name I still didn't know had been hiding from a dangerous past, from a world I couldn't even begin to understand. And now I was a part of it, whether I liked it or not. The older man stepped forward then, his posture threatening. "You need to walk away, lady. You need to forget this ever happened." You've already done enough by handing him that money every day. Now leave it alone. I shook my head, my resolve hardening. I can't just walk away. You're not going to stop me from helping him. I don't care who you are or what you've done. I'm not leaving until I know he's safe. The older man's eyes flared with anger, but before he could say anything, the boy stepped between us, his voice quiet but firm. Stop. Just stop. He looked at the man and then turned to face me. You don't understand. You can't help me. Not anymore, and that's when I realized something. I had been trying to help him in the way I knew how, by offering money, by offering kindness, but he wasn't asking for that. He had been asking for freedom. Freedom from his past. Freedom from the people who had been hunting him for years. And I couldn't give him that, but I couldn't leave him either. I couldn't walk away. Not now. The weight of the boy's words, the desperation in his eyes, was enough to push me forward. It was clear now he wasn't just some homeless kid. He was running from something far worse than I had ever imagined, something that wasn't going to let him go quietly. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I couldn't stand by and watch him disappear into that dark past again. I had to do something. I'm not leaving, I told him, my voice more forceful now. If you won't trust me, I'll trust myself. I'll find a way to get you out of this. The boy stared at me, his face a mixture of fear and frustration. He looked torn between wanting to fight me off and needing help. But after a long moment of silence, he finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. You don't know what you're asking for, he said, his eyes darting to the older man, who had been standing by, watching the exchange with an unreadable expression. They'll come after you too. They won't stop until they get what they want. You have no idea what these people can do. I wasn't afraid. At least I told myself I wasn't. What kind of person would I be if I backed down now? I had already given him my trust, and I wasn't about to let his past decide his future. I don't care about them, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. I care about you, and I'm not letting you go through this alone. He closed his eyes, taking a deep breath, as if weighing his options. The older man, who had been silent until then, stepped forward. You're making a big mistake, lady, he warned, his tone hardening. You can't play hero here. These people won't hesitate to make you pay for sticking your nose where it doesn't belong. I didn't flinch. I knew what I was up against now. I didn't know who these people were, but I knew one thing. They weren't just going to let the boy slip away without a fight, and they wouldn't hesitate to hurt anyone who got in their way, especially someone like me, a woman who didn't even belong in their world. But that didn't matter. Not anymore. I'm not afraid of them, I said. I'm afraid of losing you. His eyes softened. Just for a moment, and for the first time since I met him, I saw a flicker of gratitude. However fleeting, I don't want to be here anymore, he admitted, his voice breaking. I don't want to live like this. I never asked for any of this. But they won't stop coming. No matter where I go, no matter how far I run, they'll always find me. His confession hung in the air between us, and for a moment, everything was silent. There was no denying it now. This wasn't just about him being on the streets. This was about something far bigger than either of us. And I couldn't let him face it alone. I'll help you get away, I said, my words more determined now. There's got to be a way out. We'll figure it out together, the older man snorted, clearly unimpressed. You really think you can just sweep in and change things? You think you can fix this? You don't know the half of it, but I didn't let him discourage me. I was past that point. I had made my decision. I wasn't backing down now. I'll take my chances, I said, turning my gaze back to the boy. We'll find a way to get you out of here. You don't have to keep running. The boy looked at me for a long time, and I could see the conflict in his eyes. He wanted to believe me, but he was too afraid to. He had been running for so long, keeping his distance from people, pushing away anyone who got too close. He had learned the hard way that trust was a dangerous thing. Okay, he said finally, his voice barely audible. But you have to promise me one thing. Promise me you won't do anything reckless. Promise me you won't get hurt trying to help me. I nodded. I promise. But I'm not leaving you behind. Not now, not ever. He seemed to consider my words for a moment before nodding slowly. But the weight of what we were about to do was settling over me now. This wasn't just about helping a boy off the streets anymore. This was about trying to outrun a dangerous past that would stop at nothing to catch up. The older man watched us closely, his face twisted in frustration. This is your last chance, he warned. You're both making a huge mistake. Ignoring him, I turned to the boy and asked, "Where do we go now? Do you have a plan?" He looked up at me, his face set in determination, but there was something else there to hope. A glimmer of hope, something that had been buried deep inside him for so long. "I think I know someone," he said quietly. "Someone who can help." He didn't explain further, but I could tell that this was a person he trusted, someone who had been part of his life before everything went wrong. It was a lead at least, and in our situation, any lead was better than nothing. We didn't have much time. The longer we stayed, the more likely it was that the people from his past would find us. I didn't know how long we had before they came looking, but I wasn't going to wait around to find out. We left the warehouse quickly, walking through the back alleys to avoid being seen. The boy led the way, his eyes scanning every corner, every passing car. He was on high alert now, and so was I. I didn't know what kind of trouble we were walking into, but I was ready to face it. Whatever it took. As we reached the end of the alley, I couldn't help but look over my shoulder. The streets were still busy, but there was a tension in the air now, a quiet sense that we were being watched. "We need to move fast," the boy said, his voice urgent. "And we need to keep our heads down," I nodded. There was no turning back now. We were in this together, and I wasn't going to stop until I helped him escape. The night had fallen by the time we made it to the meeting spot, an old diner on the outskirts of town, the kind that hadn't seen much business in years. Its neon sign flickered intermittently, casting a pale, almost eerie glow across the cracked pavement. I could tell the boy didn't want to be here. His pace quickened as we approached, and his eyes darted around nervously. Every corner seemed like a threat, every shadow a potential danger. "This is the place," he said, his voice tight. "It's safe." For now, I nodded, though I didn't feel the comfort he was trying to offer. I wasn't used to this world, the world of people running from dangerous pasts, of looking over your shoulder every 5 seconds. I had always thought of myself as a sensible, level-headed woman. Now, I felt like I was living in a different reality altogether. The boy pushed open the diner door, and a bell above it jingled faintly. Inside, it was just as quiet as it looked from the outside. The dim lighting and empty tables gave it a ghostly feeling, as if no one had cared for the place in years. At the counter sat a woman early 30s, with sharp eyes and dark hair pulled back in a tight ponytail. She didn't look up when we entered, but her posture was alert, as though she'd been waiting for us. The boy made his way toward her, his body stiff with apprehension. I stayed a few paces behind, unsure of what to expect next. This was his world, not mine. I was just a stranger in it. "Lena," the boy said softly, and the woman finally looked up. Her eyes flickered briefly over him before resting on me. She didn't smile. Her expression was calculating, wary. She was used to danger. "I could see that much. You brought her?" Lena asked, her voice low but firm. The boy nodded, though it was clear he didn't want to. "She's with me. She wants to help." Lena's gaze shifted to me, then back to the boy. There was a brief silence before she spoke again, her tone cold. "You know the rules, right? No one gets involved unless they're ready to handle the consequences. You sure you want to bring her into this mess?" I could see the boy hesitate. He looked at me, almost as if he was weighing the decision. But then he nodded again, though this time with more conviction. "I trust her," he said. I stood there, trying to read the situation. This woman Lena was no stranger to this world of crime and danger. She had to have some answers. This was the lead we needed, What exactly are we doing here? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady despite the nerves gnawing at me. I wasn't sure what was going to happen next, but I knew I had to stay calm if I was going to help. Lena studied me for a moment before answering. You're here because you think you can save him, but I'm telling you right now, saving him isn't going to be easy. There's no simple way out of this. If you really want to help him, you'll need to be ready to risk everything. My stomach tightened at her words. It was becoming clear that I had underestimated just how deep the boy's past went. This wasn't going to be some neat escape. There was no way out without facing the full extent of what was coming for him. I'm ready, I said, despite the fear creeping up my spine. I'll do whatever it takes. Lena glanced at the boy, and then, without saying another word, she stood up from the counter and motioned for us to follow her. We walked to the back of the diner, through a narrow hallway, and into a small room where the air felt thick with secrets. Inside, there was a man, big, broad-shouldered, with a scar running down his cheek. He didn't look at us at first, but when Lena spoke, his gaze snapped toward us. His eyes were hard, unblinking. This is Mike, Lena said, introducing the man in a no-nonsense tone. He's going to help us get him out of town. The boy flinched when he saw Mike, and for the first time, I saw a trace of fear cross his face. This wasn't just a simple escape. This was the kind of thing that would change everything. Mike's a contact, Lena continued, her voice steady. He knows the routes, the people who can help us get him out of here. But it's not going to be easy. It's not just about getting him out of Houston. It's about disappearing. I swallowed hard. Disappearing. The word alone sent chills down my spine. What kind of life had the boy been living that he needed to vanish completely? We have a plan, Lena said, her eyes flicking between the boy and me. But we need you both to understand something. Once we start this, there's no turning back. The people who've been looking for him won't stop, and they won't hesitate to come after you too. You're as much a target as he is. My heart pounded in my chest. The reality of what we were about to do hit me all at once. There was no turning back. There was no going back to the life I had before. This was all or nothing. I understand, I said, my voice shaky but firm. I'll do whatever it takes to help. The boy didn't look at me, but I saw the faintest glimmer of gratitude in his eyes. It was enough to make me feel like I wasn't completely out of my depth. Lena turned toward Mike. Let's move fast. We don't have much time. Mike nodded and stood up, his large frame moving with surprising agility. He walked over to a small desk in the corner of the room and pulled out a map, unrolling it across the table. The map was covered in markings, routes, locations, places we could hide. Here's the plan, Mike said, pointing to the map. We get him out of the city tonight. No time to waste. We go through back roads, keep off the radar. Once we're out of Houston, we'll head for the border. There's a safe house on the other side. From there, we can figure out the next move. The boy looked at the map, his brow furrowed in concentration. He had been through this before. He knew what it meant to be on the run, to be constantly looking over his shoulder. But he didn't seem ready to argue. This was his only chance. We leave in an hour, Mike said, folding the map and looking at us both. If you're ready, let's go. I looked at the boy, my heart racing with the weight of the decision we were about to make. This wasn't just an escape, it was a fight for his life. And for the first time, I felt like I was really in this with him. The tension in the room was suffocating as Mike gathered the last of the supplies, just the bare essentials, everything else left behind. There was no time to waste. I watched as the boy prepared, his movements precise and measured. He wasn't the same person I had met all those weeks ago, the quiet, vulnerable boy on the corner. Now, he was a fugitive, a person with everything to lose. Lena stood by the door, watching us closely. She was the only one of us who seemed unaffected by the gravity of the situation. She was a professional, used to the pressure, but I could see in her eyes that even she knew how dangerous this was. We weren't just running from some vague threat. The people looking for the boy weren't the kind to give up easily. They would hunt us down, no matter where we went. I'll drive, Lena said, taking the keys to a black SUV parked out back. It looked ordinary enough, but I knew better now. This was no ordinary escape, it was a full-blown operation. The boy nodded in agreement, and I did the same. I wasn't sure what I had signed up for, but I knew this was my only shot at helping him. We had no other choice now. We piled into the SUV, the engine humming to life as Lena took the wheel. We didn't speak much on the drive out of town. It was a quiet, tense ride, each of us lost in our thoughts, knowing that we were racing against time. The streets of Houston passed by in a blur, the city lights fading into the distance as we headed for the outskirts. The plan was simple. We were going to take back roads, avoid the highways, keep off any major surveillance. The fewer eyes on us, the better. But the further we drove, the more I realized how much was at stake. The boy's past wasn't just a chapter in his life, it was a force that had taken root in every aspect of who he was. He wasn't just escaping his past, he was running for his life. We reached the highway exit that would take us into the rural roads, winding paths that would take us farther from Houston. The car's headlights cut through the darkness, the trees along the sides of the road nothing but dark silhouettes. I felt the weight of the silence in the car, unspoken tension filling the air. We knew what was waiting for us. I could see it in the boy's eyes, the way he was staring out the window, his face set in a grim expression. He was thinking about the people chasing him, about the life he was leaving behind. "We'll be okay," Lena said after a while, her voice breaking the quiet. It wasn't the reassurance I was hoping for, but it was enough. She was trying to calm us all, though I knew better than to think we were safe just because we'd left the city. Still, I tried to believe her. We were on the move. The further we got, the harder it would be for anyone to catch us. But just as I started to relax, the sound of a distant engine broke the stillness. It was faint at first, but it grew louder, too loud to ignore. The boy stiffened next to me. I could feel his anxiety rising, a cold shiver creeping down my spine. "Do you hear that?" I whispered. Lena didn't answer immediately. Instead, her eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, her expression hardening. She pushed the accelerator harder, trying to get some distance. "They're behind us," she said shortly, gripping the wheel with white knuckles. The boy looked back too, his eyes wide with fear. He was already bracing himself for what was coming. "It's them," he muttered. "They found us." Panic surged through me, but I fought it back. We couldn't afford to fall apart now. We had to keep going. We had to stay ahead of them. Lena swerved the vehicle onto a smaller road, taking us off the main path. The tires kicked up dirt as we sped through the winding, bumpy road, but it wasn't enough to shake our pursuers. The sound of the engine behind us grew closer, the headlights flashing in the distance. "Hold on," Lena said, her voice sharp. She pushed the pedal to the floor, and the SUV surged forward, weaving in and out of turns. The road barely wide enough to fit the vehicle, but it wasn't enough. We were still being followed. I looked back again, trying to make out the vehicle chasing us. It was hard to see in the dark, but the lights were unmistakable. A large black truck, its grille menacing in the glow of the headlights. It was moving faster than I had expected, gaining on us. "We're not going to outrun them," Lena said, gritting her teeth. "We need to lose them." The boy's face was pale, his grip on the seat tight. "We need to get to the safe house. We can't let them catch us." His voice was shaky now, fear cutting through his words. "If they do, we're dead." Lena glanced at him briefly, her jaw set. "We're not letting that happen." She slammed her foot down on the brake, throwing us into a sharp turn. The SUV fishtailed, skidding sideways, but Lena kept control. The truck behind us didn't fare as well. The driver of the pursuing vehicle overcompensated, slamming the brakes too hard, and the truck skidded off the road, careening into the trees. We didn't have time to see if they had crashed completely. We couldn't afford to wait around. Lena hit the gas again, and the SUV shot forward, barreling down the road at full speed. The boy's breathing was ragged next to me, his knuckles white as he clung to the door. I kept my eyes straight ahead, doing my best to stay calm, but inside, my heart was racing. We drove in silence after that, the only sound the hum of the engine and the rush of wind through the cracked windows. I kept expecting to see the headlights of the truck behind us again, but after a few miles, the sound faded. I glanced back one last time. The road was empty. We lost them, Lena said, exhaling a long breath, but the relief was short-lived. The boy hadn't said anything since the chase began. He was staring ahead, his face ashen, his mind clearly miles away, somewhere he couldn't escape. We're not safe yet, he muttered. They're not going to stop. Not until they get what they want. I didn't know what kind of people he was running from, but I could see now how relentless they were. By the time we reached the safe house, I was convinced that we had outrun our pursuers. The roads had grown quieter, and the night seemed to settle around us, offering the illusion of peace. We arrived at a small, nondescript house tucked away in a rural area, a place that seemed to have been forgotten by the rest of the world. The lights were dim inside, but there was something welcoming about the place. Lena parked the SUV in the driveway, and we piled out of the vehicle. The boy was the first to move, his face still pale, his hands trembling slightly. I could tell he was relieved to have made it this far, but there was something else in his eyes, a quiet, unspoken fear. It was like he knew we weren't done running, even if we had temporarily escaped. We made it, Lena said, trying to sound confident, though the tension in her voice gave her away. We'll rest here for the night. Tomorrow, we'll figure out our next move. The boy nodded but didn't say anything. I could see how he was still carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders, his thoughts elsewhere, and I understood why. We had made it this far, but that didn't mean we were safe. The house was modest, the furniture worn but functional. It felt like a refuge, a place where time slowed down for just a moment. Lena led us to the kitchen, where we sat down to take a breath. No one spoke at first, but I could feel the boy's eyes on me, like he was trying to gauge whether he could trust me with something he hadn't told me before. I need to tell you something, he said, his voice barely a whisper. Lena looked up sharply, her expression guarded, but she said nothing. I leaned forward, waiting for him to continue. The boy took a deep breath, his hands shaking as he clasped them together. What I've been running from, what I told you about being hunted, it's not just some random people. It's my family. My real family. I blinked, confused. Your family? I asked slowly. But you never mentioned them. The boy nodded, his face tightening with pain. My father's a criminal, part of a cartel that runs drugs, weapons, anything they can get their hands on. He's one of the biggest players in the business, and I've been running from him for years. When I was younger, I tried to get out, tried to escape that life. But they don't let people leave. They don't let their own blood walk away. The pieces were finally falling into place, though I wished I hadn't heard the truth. He wasn't just a lost soul on the streets. He was the son of a criminal empire, someone who had tried to escape it, only to be dragged back into it. I felt my heart sink as he continued, his voice trembling. When I was 16, my father found me. He tried to force me back into the family business. When I refused, he sent people after me. I've been on the run ever since, moving from city to city, trying to stay one step ahead. But every time I thought I could live a normal life, they found me. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine as I realized the full extent of the danger we were in. This wasn't just about some criminal gang, it was a family that would stop at nothing to get their son back. And they weren't afraid to use anyone in their path to do it. I never wanted any of this, the boy said, his voice breaking. I just wanted to get out. I wanted to be someone else. But every time I try, they find me. And now you're involved. I reached out, placing a hand on his arm, trying to comfort him in some small way. I'm not going anywhere. We'll get through this together. I promise you. He looked at me, his eyes filled with uncertainty. You don't know what you're saying. They'll come for you too. They'll make sure you're part of this. And there's nothing I can do to stop them. Before I could respond, Lena stood up abruptly, her hand on her hip, eyes scanning the room like a hawk. We don't have time for this, she said, cutting through the conversation. They've already found us, the boy went still, his face paling even further. What do you mean, they've found us? Lena gave us a hard look, her jaw clenched. I've been watching the roads since we arrived. We're not alone. They're already here. They know we're at this house. I stood up, feeling the air around me grow thick with dread. The boy's fear seemed to turn to panic, his hands gripping the table, his chest rising and falling with each breath. We need to go, he said urgently, looking to Lena. Now. We can't stay here. They'll kill us if they find us here. Lena was already moving, grabbing her jacket and heading for the back door. Get ready, she said sharply. We'll take a different route. It's the only way out. Before I knew it, we were all moving quickly, almost. There was no time to think, no time to plan. The only thing that mattered now was getting out of there before the boy's family arrived. But as we reached the back door, the sound of engines revving outside made it clear that we had no time left. The boy turned to me, his face pale, his eyes wide with fear. You need to go, now. They'll find you, and you'll be just another target. No, I said, shaking my head. I'm not leaving you behind. But before I could take another step, the sound of tires screeching filled the air. A black SUV came tearing down the gravel driveway, its headlights blinding in the dark. I could see shadows and side figures moving, preparing for what was to come. Lena's voice was a sharp command. We move now. We bolted out the back, running as fast as we could through the yard, trying to make it to the tree line. But as we hit the edge of the property, I saw them, 2 men in black, coming toward us fast. The boy froze, fear in his eyes, but Lena grabbed his arm and pulled him forward. This is it, she said, her voice grim. Get ready, but just as the men drew closer, there was a sudden explosion of light, bright flashes coming from the trees. The sound of gunfire rang out, the sharp crack of bullets slicing through the air. I ducked instinctively, pulling the boy down with me. What's happening? I gasped. Lena pulled her gun from under her jacket and fired back. We're not running anymore. It's time to end this. The boy looked at me, his face filled with disbelief. You can't stop them. But before he could finish, there was a sudden, sharp crack from the forest, and the men in black dropped to the ground. The boy's eyes widened. Who? The shadows in the trees parted, revealing a figure I hadn't expected, someone I never thought would show up. Standing in front of us was the boy's father, his face cold and unfeeling. You didn't think you could escape forever, did you? He said softly. You're mine, and you always will be.